Molo, how's it? Hoe gaan it? Welcome, News 24 cast of thousands from wherever in Mzansi you're tuning into today for our very latest webinar. It's entitled Mkhwanazi, Matlala and Mayhem, Power, Politics and the Political Killings Task Team. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer. I'm a broadcast journalist and host of News 24's definitive daily podcast, The Lead. I'll be introducing our guests in the next short while. But first, can you believe it? It's week 3 of the Matlala Commission of Inquiry in Central Pretoria, and we've witnessed some damning allegations of criminal capture of the country's criminal justice system. We first heard from the man who had forced the president to act. That's KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, who insisted that if nothing urgent is done soon, our police and prosecutorial services would virtually collapse. He's raised the alarm on the now suspended police minister Senzo Mtunu's proximity to a mysterious individual named Brian Mahotsi. We only know that he's from the Northwest, who's allegedly enjoyed direct access to some sensitive crime intelligence information. While Mkhwanazi's boss, National Top Cop Fani Masemola, was up next and in turn has labeled Mtunu's decision to disband the much-touted political killings task team as quote-unquote unlawful. And what about the notorious cat? Well, Masemola claims his deputy Shadrach Sabir can be linked directly to Vusimuzi Matlala and Gauteng's shadowy underworld dealings as well. Now, the rot in our South African police service is so bad, it's alleged, that the senior men and women in blue have a name for the criminal syndicate that infiltrated its heart. The Big Five, because of course it is. And with the new inquiry evidence leader now entering the fray, how can we better make sense of these claims that we're hearing on a daily basis? Well, to navigate us through this noise, if you will, we're joined live from the Bridget Mabandla Justice College, in Central Pretoria. That's by our News 24 specialist legal journalist, Karyn Maughan. She might have a bit of a dodgy signal at the moment, but bear with us for time being. Also on our panels, Mbekezeli Benjamin, a well-known researcher and advocacy officer for non-profit group Judges Matter, very critical, and of course our News 24 investigations editor Pieter rounds out our panel discussion today. Thank you so much for joining. I think let's begin with Karyn. She's got the very latest as we now head to lunch at that commission. Karyn, you've just emerged from there. Take us through the basis of crime intelligence boss Dumisani Kumalo's evidence thus far, Karyn. WhatsApp message evidence has been brought to the fore, and it's particularly around that 31 December 2024 disbandment letter sent by the now suspended police minister. And these messages between the mysterious Mahotsi and Kat Matlala are now at the fore. What do they reveal?
Well, essentially what Dumisani Kumalo is saying is that these WhatsApp communications, which were taken off Kat Matlala's phone by officers, he says he can only reveal these 5 streams of communication, reveal predominantly, and this is what he's focusing on today, his communication with Brian Mahotsi, who, as you rightly point out, is a central figure in this entire narrative, because of course it is Brian Mahotsi who in these WhatsApp messages presents himself as a kind of conduit and connector to Police Minister Senzo Mkhwanazi. He makes repeated requests for money, for transportation, for apparent potential buying of votes in a political process, which has not been ventilated clearly up until this point. And in the last few moments before the commission broke, it became apparent in Kat Matlala's responses to Mahotsi's repeated requests for entertainment in Cape Town and accommodation in Camps Bay, that he didn't necessarily like the way that this whole thing was playing out, and he wanted a meeting with the person, the main man, the person that he believed, it is apparent from this messages, that he was supporting, and that of course is Police Minister Senzo Mkhwanazi.
Right. If you're just tuning in, of course, and you've perhaps missed the morning's events at the Matlala Commission of Inquiry, we've got the News 24 live blog up. It's fantastic. It keeps track of all the main sort of evidence that we've heard thus far. And Karyn, as well as her colleague Bernadette Wicks, are doing a fantastic job of keeping us abreast of the developments there. I want to bring in our colleague here on this panel. It's Mbekezeli Benjamin from Judges Matter. Mbekezeli, thanks so much for joining us today. Chief Justice Mandisa Meyer from my mind, was very quick out of the gates following the initial Mkhwanazi bombshell press conference. She came out and said, look, if any witnesses or anyone's got evidence of alleged wrongdoing in the judiciary, they need to come forward now. So far, we haven't really heard all that much in terms of the testimony thus far. Mkhwanazi, the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Police Commissioner, was quite implicit that there was a lot of threats and bribery, specifically around the murder investigations into the mistaken hit on Vol engineer Arman Swat, which has been a pivotal case throughout the unraveling of this testimony. Are you satiated from what you've heard thus far? It doesn't seem, from my mind, that the judiciary or magisterial side of things has been looked at in terms of the allegations that Mkhwanazi's hinted at yet. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Graeme, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists, Karyn and Pieter. Yes, you're quite right. Chief Justice Meyer issued a statement, I think 2-3 days later after that Sunday press briefing, asking for evidence to support what are quite serious allegations. And we must underscore the seriousness of the allegations made by quite a senior police officer. And so we do expect that they would be backed up by evidence, because it's one thing to make allegations at a press briefing, but it's quite another to put up concrete evidence to support them. And that's why we have been listening quite closely to the commission so far. You're quite right. General Mkhwanazi and the other witnesses haven't spoken a lot about the judiciary, including judges and magistrates, but there have been some mentions in General Mkhwanazi's evidence, and that is relating to the bail that was granted in that Arman Swat court case. General Mkhwanazi didn't mention the name of the magistrate who gave the bail, but said it was done under dubious circumstances. And so we are still waiting for evidence to support that, because at this point it's very hard to draw any conclusion or to make any sense of that allegation. But there was also a second mention of another magistrate in Pretoria, and there General Mkhwanazi mentioned him by name. But he mentioned it in quite a strange way, in that it was sort of conjecture that two things happened, and then sort of he drew his own conclusion to say the magistrate gave bail conditions that were not necessarily asked for by the prosecutor. And those allegations relate to the court case involving crime intelligence and the officers in the crime intelligence and the in sort of appointment of an agent or an officer in crime intelligence. And that's where General Kumalo's evidence becomes relevant, because he is also involved in that case. And so we're hoping he'll shed a little bit more light into those allegations, because at this point, what General Mkhwanazi said is that the magistrate gave bail conditions which effectively froze the crime intelligence officers out of their role, in that he said, the magistrate that is, said that they can't step or set foot at any premises of the crime intelligence division. So for now, there's not much, but it is important that we get a little bit more information on that, because we are hoping that the commission will, in its interim report, highlight those allegations against judicial officers, if there are any substantiation to them, and refer them on to the JSC for further investigation. So that is something that is still yet to come.
Of course, Mbekezeli, the investigating directorate against corruption, the body with teeth as part of the NPA set up by the Zondo Commission's recommendations, has its own set of allegations, and we'll come back to you in the next short while to address some of Mkhwanazi's claims in regards to IDAC. Pieter du Toit, our News 24 investigations editor, must be grinning like a Cheshire cat this week, because essentially, Pieter, the SIU, the Special Investigating Unit, released its interim report into the Tembisa Hospital tender scam. It was first flagged, as we know it, by slain whistleblower Babita Diekaran. And News 24's silent series of investigations, which later became the blueprint for our colleague Jeff Wick's book, Shadow State. Now the SIU's report sort of complements all the work that News 24 has already done, and it reveals implicitly that there was 9 criminal syndicates that had taken root at this particular hospital, extracting some 2 billion rand over 2 years. And of course, Vusimuzi cat Matlala, in these early days of unraveling this particular web, his name wasn't far, right? Very good afternoon.
Graeme, yeah, I mean, it's I think it's enormously satisfying to see the SIU yesterday confirming our reporting. Not, what irritated me slightly over the last 24 hours are other news outlets saying that the SIU have revealed the following, whereas News 24 and Jeff Wicks and the investigative team has really been writing about this for close on to 2.5 years. The existence of these networks, the existence of these syndicates, the links to senior elements in the criminal justice system. We've been writing about that literally for 2.5 years. Now, yesterday at that press conference addressed by the SIU, you had politicians at the top table, the Minister of Health, the Premier of Gauteng, the MEC of Health in Gauteng. Where have they been over the last 2.5 years whilst we have been writing about this, whilst we've been exposing these networks, links with at least writing about the struggles that the criminal justice system has in trying to unravel the murder of Babita Deokaran. So the Nhlanhla Commission really, yes, from a journalistic point of view, it's satisfying to see that our reporting is being affirmed by not only the Commission but also by the SIU. But what's enormously frustrating is the fact that this has been in the public domain for, like I say, 2.5 years. The existence of these syndicates in the public domain for 2.5 years. The fact that they've been extracting all these resources from the public sector in public domain for 2.5 years. What have they done? They've done absolutely nothing. So these politicians, these elected officials in Gauteng and at national level, they should really take a long and good hard look at themselves. And what we are seeing being unraveled now at the Nhlanhla Commission is a deep insight into the dark world and the dark environment around not only the criminal justice system, but these vast networks of extraction that still operate in the public domain, that still are melded with public systems, public procurement systems. And that's the big problem that we have at the moment. The accountability, the frustration that we see with that, the fact that the criminal justice system, elements and institutions within the criminal justice system simply don't have the capability, the ability, and the skills and the resources to be able to tackle these syndicates. Graeme, a couple of weeks ago, we published a story with a photograph of Edwin Sodi's 50th birthday party, where you had Keith Khoza, Kat Matlala, Edwin Sodi, Lebogang Mahile, TK Nkiza, who is the ANC's convener in Gauteng, all sitting around a table, having a good old proper piss-up, having an enjoyable party. These are all intertwined with each other, and that's the problem we've got. Whether this commission will be able to unravel that and ensure accountability, that's a question for Karyn, and I think that's a question we're going to have to answer down the line.
Thanks. That's our News 24 investigations editor, Pieter. We'll come back to him. I want to go back to Karyn at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College in Central Pretoria, where the commission is currently playing out. Karyn, we've now started getting a little bit more evidence, a little bit more of a picture being emerging of this so-called Big Five criminal syndicate that's rooted itself in the heart of the SAPS, allegedly within Gauteng. What do we know about the heads that make up this Big Five thus far? Names, of course, have been dropped about the cat, who's being discussed so much within the public ether. But it doesn't feel like we know an awful lot about the other shadowy figures here.
No, we don't. And General Kumalo made it very clear that was because the police were not at a stage to name the people that they say are at the top of the pyramid of that syndicate. They have named two of them, of course, Kat Matlala and Katise Malefe. Of course, Pieter Pieter referencing the Tembisa hospital scandal. Kat Matlala was on Jeff Wicks's radar because of that scandal, because he was linked to benefiting from the looting of that facility. And of course, he, as in the aftermath of that, it is Jeff's reporting that then highlights how, despite being under investigation for that, he's awarded a 360 million health services tender by the police, then under the leadership of Mbekezeli, who, of course, is a big figure in this inquiry and will undoubtedly have to come and testify here. Very fascinating person, because at one end of the spectrum, a fierce proponent of the political killings task team, whose disbandment and Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has definitively linked to the project of undermining law enforcement and sort of, suffusing the legal environment with compromise, but simultaneously having stayed, as Jeff Wicks's exemplary reporting revealed, at Matlala's property at his penthouse on at least two occasions. And of course, the other story, 10 missed calls in the immediate aftermath of Mkhwanazi's allegations, calling him 10 times. So, this is a complex story. And as Pieter has so carefully referenced, it really goes to the heart of a disintegrated legal environment where we have known for years that there have been serious allegations of corruptions and sometimes convictions for a number of very, very powerful police officials. We know about the factionalism. We know about the dysfunctionality. The real question is, does that dysfunctionality creep into the sphere of what Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has alleged, and that is a whole-scale criminal capture of the law enforcement system? And he, of course, Kumalo is a fierce ally of his. It's very obvious from their evidence and Fani Masamala's evidence that they regard themselves as a kind of group within the police that are trying to, on their version, push back against these criminals. But, what has been fascinating, and I think Pieter referenced it as well, is that while we have these big claims of Kat Matlala being involved in contract killings, we know that he's been arrested for an attempted hit on his former lover, Topohoto Bajane. Again, very excellent reporting from our colleagues on that. He's, according to Kumalo, implicated in drug trafficking, implicated in kidnapping, implicated in a vast variety of crimes, but only at this point facing that one charge. And of course, Khatisa Malefe was also arrested in the aftermath of the attempted, of the murder of Mr. Swat. He has been linked to the killings of two other DJs, but of course, according to Kumalo, is also linked to a wide variety of crimes, including drugs, for which he has not been charged. So again, big claims, but very little on the table outside of these important attempted murder cases to indicate that the police actually have a hold on getting justice for the alleged victims of these people.
100%, Karyn. Quick one before I move to Mbekezeli on the IDAC issue. There was this talk now in the testimony of the last 2 days about the now cancelled 365 million rand SAPS health services tender, which the CAT had thus gotten allegedly through his links to the SAPS. But this was, of course, during the end of former Minister Mbekezeli's tenure, and of course was under the auspices of Fani Masamala as a national top cop. What do we know so far about who knew what?
Well, this is what's so fascinating for me. And, I'm very proud to work for News 24. But most of the stuff we already knew because of the reporting of my colleagues. So, it's been very apparent just how much of this has been informed by excellent investigative journalism. But we know that Mkhunu, after 4 days after seeing Jeff Wicks's story on the 20th of December, has a meeting with Fani Masamolo and says, I need an investigation. Kat Matlala, of course, is named in that reporting as being the recipient of this massive tender. I need an investigation, an audit. He then asks for an audit of the contract. That audit report finds widespread, alleged corruption, fronting. And all of this, of course, is highlighted in Jeff's report on the 20th of December, before that report even comes out. And then, of course, Masamola, for reasons that I'm sure he's going to be very strongly criticized over when he comes back here, sits on that report for 103 days. And it is only, Graeme, when, the arrest of Kat Matlala happens and that cell phone is then seized, that he cancels the contract. And we don't know at this point why it took him so long.
Sure, absolutely. Let's go to our colleague Mbekezeli Benjamin with Judges Matter. There's been some claims made mostly on the part of Mkhwanazi in his initial 3 days testimony before the inquiry, Mbekezeli, regarding the investigating directorate against corruption, IDAC. Essentially, Mkhwanazi's accusations was that the unit was apparently complicit in protecting a Gauteng drug cartel, or all of these mechanizations of this Gauteng entrenched criminal syndicate. We've since, and of course, News 24 has reported and got an IDAC side of the story to say, you know, they're going to be bringing their own evidence to counter what Mkhwanazi said so far. It really shows you that none of this is really clear cut, and that we should be following the initial evidence leader, Mr. Tau's emphasis that we should be treating everything at the commission, with a lot of suspicion, because we should be impartial here. What do you make of the IDAC saga and what we've heard thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important thing to put forward, Owen, Graeme, that we need to suspend our judgment until we've heard all of the evidence, until all of the evidence is in. We can't necessarily conclude based only on one side, because what does seem clear is that there is deep division among law enforcement agencies, even amongst the SAPS and other parts of the justice system taken as a whole. And so there's also an interesting crossover between the Zondo Commission and this Nhlanhla Commission, because as you rightly mentioned earlier, the IDAC was born from the Zondo Commission, and it was meant as a mechanism to sort of respond to state capture and corruption. And in fact, the Zondo Commission did investigate the security forces or the law enforcement agencies, including crime intelligence and the State Security Agency. And those allegations were still lingering in the air, and the IDAC was meant to take over some of those investigations. So what we've heard from the Nhlanhla Commission so far is that there is deep suspicion over IDAC's intentions in terms of some of the investigations. General Mkhwanazi made mention that there is that infiltration, and the IDAC is an enabler of that infiltration. But again, we can't necessarily take it at face value. The IDAC still has a response to make in terms of those allegations. And again, it's important to look at the evidence with suspicion, because some of the allegations are quite explosive at face value, but without a follow-through of the evidence, and this is what General Mkhwanazi said himself, that there will be others who will testify. Unless we hear that evidence and we hear the counter allegations or counter evidence from the IDAC, it's very hard to conclude that there was actually complicity or a working with these criminal syndicates, because what General Mkhwanazi is saying is that some of the investigators from IDAC are people who were retired from the police service, and they sort of came back in the form of IDAC investigators working with prosecutors. And it's also something important. IDAC sits in the NPA, and it's meant to be an investigative arm of the NPA. And when you contrast this with how the political killings task team also functions very closely with the NPA. So there does seem to be, even amongst the same institution, different trust or different suspicions of different parts of that same institution, like the NPA. So again, it's important that we keep a clear mind over these allegations and not jump to conclusion without hearing all of them, or without hearing a fuller picture up to this point.
100%. I just want to, Mbekezeli, just pick your mind very quickly. Of course, we've seen the news now that Matthew Chaskelson SC is now taken over from Terry Matau as the chief evidence leader. What do you make of this move? It's kind of taken all of us by a little bit by surprise.
Well, look, the commission does seem to be a team effort. It does seem that the evidence leaders are working amongst each other, sharing different portions of the investigation and leading different witnesses, because Matthew Chaskelson actually came on the 17th to give an update on on the commission's investigation, what the plans are, and the different approaches. So already by that stage, he was giving an indication that he was quite active in the leadership of the investigative team. Obviously, Terry Matau, as chief evidence leader, has I think, gave an opening laying out the process of the investigation, what are the different phases that are involved. And I think it's quite a loss to lose him at this stage. But I'm hopeful that the team will sort of recover from him and be able to still go ahead with the evidence as we see today. And in fact, if you notice the junior evidence leaders are working across different teams, leading different witnesses. Ms. Poe, who's working with Advocate Adila Hassim today, was working with Terry Mutau on the previous witness, General Masimula. So it does seem to be a team effort. I don't expect that there would be a lot of impact in Terry Mutau's loss, but of course it's unfortunate, and we still hope the commission will explain the circumstances.
Right. We'll come back to you again. And Mbekezeli, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. If you're just joining us, we're discussing in this very webinar, News 24 Cast of Thousands, an update, if you will, on the Nhlanhla Commission thus far and all the different moving parts going now to News 24 Investigations editor, Pieter de Toit. What do you make of this big five talk, Pieter? You know, a lot of Dumisani Kumalo, as the crime intelligence boss, has really been an important part of the testimony that we've needed to hear thus far, right? He's coloring in a lot of the lines that as well as Masemola have brought in terms of the basis of their allegations of this Gauteng criminal syndicate with its 5 heads entrenching itself in the heart of the money, the heart of the SAPS of South Africa as we know it. What do you make of all of it thus far? I'm sure you'll also agree we need to sort of treat this with a lot of impartiality. This is early days.
Well, look, Graeme, a couple of things. And, before I pick up on what Mbekezeli said about IDAC and the allegations against IDAC, first of all, during the testimony over the last couple of days, certainly yesterday, there were references to certain syndicates, and there was a specific syndicate, Syndicate X, that was not named by the evidence, neither the evidence leader or the individuals testifying. Now, News 24 has already written about Syndicate X. We've written about Stefan Govindraju and other individuals who are part of syndicates. We've identified these syndicates. We've identified exactly how these networks of extraction work. We've identified where the money went to. We identified the company. So it's out there. It's in our reporting. If you trace our reporting into Tembisa, into these syndicates from mid-2022, you'll find all those syndicates there. You'll find them named, and you'll find the individuals named. You'll find the ringleaders of these syndicates named, and you'll also find exactly where the money went and how it was siphoned off and exfiltrated from the state. So that's everything is there. Why it's taken up until now for anyone to act on it is a good question. And Karyn referred to it, and I referred to it as well. The collapse or the struggles in the criminal justice system, the dysfunctionality in the police, in crime intelligence, where Dumisani Kumalo is the head. Currently, legally speaking, that's where the core of the problem lies. And then Mbekezeli spoke about the allegations against IDAC, and you also said, Graeme, that we need to be impartial. But the allegations leveled against IDAC, I'm very skeptical of. The allegations leveled against IDAC by General Mkhwanazi 2 weeks ago, or the last week rather, where he made allegations against IDAC, elements in IDAC acting outside of their mandate. That sounds very suspicious to me, very suspicious in the sense that we know what happened in 2008-9 when the Directorate of Special Operations, which was also housed in the NPA, commonly known as the Scorpions, got too close to politicians. When the Scorpions were starting to make headway into grand corruption, was starting to move close to politicians in the ANC, that's when the attacks on the Scorpions started. That's when the integrity of the Scorpions was attacked. That's when the Scorpions' ability to execute their duties was being undermined. And in December 2008, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, who was the president at the time, signed into law 2 bills which disbanded the Scorpions. Now, why was the Scorpions disbanded? Because they got too close to politicians. Fast forward 5 years after that, or 6 years after that, the SARS High-Risk Investigations Unit starting to make headway into organized crime, specifically around the movement of illicit tobacco, linked to senior ANC politicians, looking at the tax affairs of politicians who were living way above their means. What happened? You had a disinformation campaign against SARS's High-Risk Investigations Unit with the connivance of the Sunday Times at the time, of senior journalists at the time. And what happened? The high-risk investigation unit was disemboweled, removed from SARS, and we've lost 11 years of law enforcement through the tax code and the tax system enabled by SARS and the high-risk investigations unit. Now you've got IDAC, the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption, who is also starting to make headway in our fight against corruption, linking senior politicians with these syndicates, with these networks. IDAC have had a measure of success over the last year or so, Karyn, you'd agree, in ensuring that the Ace Magashule and the Nhlanhla, or we're still debating how you pronounce that. Some of these senior cases, big cases, going to the High Court. Now IDAC is seemingly looking at what's happening with crime intelligence. We know the head of crime intelligence is close to General Mkhwanazi, and General Mkhwanazi makes all these allegations against IDAC without producing any evidence. So we need to be very skeptical of what's being said at this commission without producing tangible evidence, because we will, like we saw with the Scorpions in 2008 and the SARS high risk investigation unit in 2014, we will be doing damage to institutions that are fighting back against corruption if we report and consider evidence at this commission without the appropriate evidence being presented, and we've not seen that yet. So I'm urging caution in that sense.
Pieter, just staying with you, and in one of our previous episodes of The Lead on News 24, we spoke about Edwin Sodi's 50th birthday bash, and you always forget that former ANC spokesperson Pule Mabe was at the party as well.
You're right.
So I just wanted to add that as well. But, the picture that's forming at the Matlala Commission, and everything that News 24 has reported on thus far, the SIU confirming our investigations, the silenced investigations into Tembisa Hospital. What does this all say politically about the ANC at the moment as we head to next year's local government elections? At the beginning, before the Matlala Commission was brought and we saw this bombshell press conference brought by Mkhwanazi, there was the first political pundits coming along and saying, is this the death knell for the ANC? Your view at that point?
Look, Graeme, a couple of things. One is I think it's undeniable that we are moving towards a political era where the ANC will not be the dominant political force like it has been for the last 30 years in South African politics. We saw the ANC being punished for polls last year. They're at around 40 at the moment. This is likely, the decline of the ANC is likely to accelerate. And the big reason for this will be the intertwining of interests between criminal syndicates, politicians, and local political leaders. What we've seen with our reporting, and reporting broader than News 24 certainly over the last couple of years, is how closely these networks of extraction move with political leaders, how closely aligned bureaucrats in the public sector is with these syndicates, and how they are enabled by elected political leaders. So what we are seeing is this nexus between the ANC, organized crime, the public sector, and the extraction of resources. We're seeing it in real time. We are reporting on it in real time. And Graeme, I'm trying to find the right words for this, because we can literally see these systems operate in real time. When we publish these stories, we're not starting to develop. We have developed the exact template for how this thing works. And you simply cannot remove the ANC from these networks of extraction. These networks of extraction are enabled by ANC elected leaders, executed by bureaucrats placed in those positions by ANC leaders, often to the benefit of the party. These funds are recycled back to the ANC. It happened on the East Rand, it's happening in Gauteng, it's happening everywhere, and we're seeing it in real time.
100%. And of course, whistleblowers, financial auditors, especially on Gauteng's East Rand, coming under fire in the meantime. A lot of conversation as well regarding, is South Africa going down the same route as Mexico and Brazil, and the silencing of these important voices, especially the fourth estate, as we as journalists also starting to feel that a little bit more heat these days, a little bit more cause for concern than ever before. Karyn, I know you've got to go back inside for the latest testimony, and we really appreciate your time here on this discussion today. What are we going back into at the Matlala Commission of Inquiry? Dumisani Kumalo still on the stand. What are we expecting to hear? Do you know?
Well, he's going to continue going through these WhatsApps, which actually started, I think they started on the 19th of December, 2024, between Matlala and Mkhwanazi. And we've been going through the days that surrounded the decision to disband the PKTT, but simultaneously, of course, while, there's this rejoicing about the disbandment, simultaneously, Mkhwanazi's decision to ask for an audit sees Matlala then facing questions about his health services tender. And what Kumalo has said is that in the messages that follow, it's about Mkhwanazi, presenting himself as this potential savior of this, tender that looks like it's going to be cancelled. And of course, we have had reporting from Jeff Wicks that Mkhwanazi would also present himself as a lever and a mechanism for which Matlala, needed to pay in order to get his money from that contract. So that evidence is going to continue. As we are expecting Kumalo to be on the stand for at least the next week. And then, of course, we know that he's going to make an application to have another trove of evidence heard in camera, which, of course, will not, potentially may not be granted by the Commission. But given that the Commission has, within its terms of reference, been placed firmly responsible for the safety of any witnesses and potential witnesses to this alleged criminal enterprise, I think that there's a very, very strong possibility that that evidence will be in camera, and we won't necessarily have access to it, only really getting a sense of it when a redacted report is presented at the end of this inquiry.
Of course, that's Karyn Maughan, our specialist legal journalist at News 24. You can follow her as well as our colleague Bernadette Wicks for all the rolling coverage of the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry in Central Pretoria via our News 24 live blog. It's very nifty. If you're a News 24 subscriber, you can understand everything in black and white in the text right there. And Mbekezeli Benjamin, you're going to get the second last word from NGO Judges Matter. The independence of our judiciary, of our very court system in this country today, Mbekezeli, is one of the hallmarks of South Africa's democracy. The fact that our judges and magistrates and courts are seen to be very much independent is one of those things that we celebrate quite closely in this country, and I'm especially proud of it because it speaks to the hard-fought constitution that has taken us thus far through many of huge developments throughout this country's history. What do you want to see come out of this commission that would be tangible, that would speak to issues that has already come up for you as an NGO over the last 30 years?
Yeah, Graeme, you're quite right. The independence of our judiciary is something that we should be rightly proud as a country, but we can't sit on our laurels and expect that the independence will forever sit intact as an edifice. We should always be vigilant, and that's what we at Judges Matter are always doing. In as much as we respect the judiciary, but we also expect it to be held accountable, and for those who are implicated to be dealt with effectively and swiftly. So what we are expecting from this commission is, of course, a follow-through to the allegations, the very serious allegations that should emphasize that were made by General Mkhwanazi. We're expecting that evidence will be provided to support those allegations. We expect that the relevant bodies, which is the Magistrates Commission, the Judicial Service Commission, to take action against those implicated. And it's important that action is taken against those implicated, because one of the things that spending time with judges and magistrates is that they are also agonizing against those who are implicated or in wrongdoing in the judiciary not being dealt with. It taints the rest of the system. So they also expect that they will be dealt with. And so what we are hoping is that the JSC, the Magistrates Commission, will quickly pick up on these allegations, will investigate them and take sanctions against those implicated. We already know that from the Zondo Commission, there were in fact 2 judicial officers that were named in the Zondo Commission, and there is action taken against them. It is not as fast as it should be, but we know that one magistrate is currently on trial for corruption. He's also being dealt with by the Magistrates Commission. There's a judge who's already been investigated. She's recommended for impeachment. We're waiting on Parliament to implement that recommendation. So there is a track record of action being taken in the judiciary, and we expect that from these allegations in the Nhlanhla Commission, the same will follow. And that is, again, to ensure that our judiciary remains independent, it remains with people with integrity, and those without that integrity must be removed as quickly as possible.
Of course, and this will not be the last time we chat, Mbekezeli. I really do appreciate it. He's a research and advocacy officer there at Judges Matter. I'm sure we'll be touching base again as this commission drags on for who knows how long. Pieter, you've got the final word. What do you say to our News 24 subscribers, people who've been following these investigations for such a long time? As you say, the SIU is now sort of, I don't want to say caught up, but it's now obviously affirmed and confirmed what us as a News 24 investigations team has already been working on for such a long time. And again, you know, it's supporting the good work that's being done to strengthen the very foundations of our democracy. So what do you say to those people going, you know, what can we expect next in the silent story? What can we expect next in this, the Vusimuzi Cat Matlala saga? Is it more revelations about, you know, how the proximity that our former police minister Mbekezeli had to these alleged tender-dons? Give us your final word, please, Pieter.
Well, Graeme, look, I think when we started investigating the death of Babita, when we started looking at what went wrong at Tembisa, you know, we never thought that it would be as big as it has become. This is not only a story about Tembisa. This is not only a story about Babita. This is a story about a system. This is about the story about systemic and institutionalized corruption. And it's not only about Tembisa. We will be publishing a story tomorrow which shows how these networks are branching outside of Gauteng, how they're moving into different provinces, into different departments even. So this is really, it kick-started an investigation, and we are starting to pull on threads, but this is about systemic and institutionalized corruption at provincial level and at national level, and we won't be stopping, you know, and we do this in the public interest. We do this on behalf of readers, you know, and it might sound idealistic, but we do this because we want a better country for all, and that's where that's what we'd like to see. And if we have to keep on exposing these the depths of this rot, we will do so, Graeme.
100%. That's Pieter du Toit, our News 24 investigations editor. Well, if you've just tuned in, I'm sorry you've missed a fantastic discussion, but don't worry, it's going to be on tonight's edition of The Lead, dropping, of course, like clockwork at 7 p.m. across all your favorite audio platforms. And this very discussion lives on the News 24 YouTube page, so you can go and listen to it there as well. A big thanks to the roundtable discussion, our team of panelists, as we've just seen from News 24's investigations editor, Pieter du Toit. We just heard from Karyn, our specialist legal journalist, who's gone back inside to the Nhlanhla Commission, where the rolling coverage will continue now as lunch ends. And we've just heard from Mbekezeli Benjamin as well, a researcher and advocacy officer at Judges Matter. Thank you so much to everybody as part of this panel today. Kosikakulu, Kialabola, in Giabonga. We'll do it again soon, taking stock of the Nhlanhla Commission. And we really appreciate you, News 24 cast of thousands, for tuning into this very special webinar on this Tuesday, on the final day of September 2025. Can you believe it? My name's been Graeme Raubenheimer. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until the next one.